Switching gears now, Joe Biden arrived in the Caribbean earlier today for yet another vacation, this one to ring in the new year as crises pile up for the president and his administration at home. Joining me now is Joe Concha, politics and media columnist at The Messenger and Fox News contributor, and Garrett Ventry, Republican strategist and former senior advisor to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Gentlemen, great to see you. Garrett, I'll come to you first. The presidency used to be known as the most challenging job in the world. Now it looks like it's just a place you go to get a free ride.
Yeah, David, and thanks for having me on. Good to be back with you here. Joe Biden's presidency essentially looks like a French work week meets Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but for 3 years here. I mean, you're talking about RNC Research put out research on this where about 40% of his presidency has either been at his Delaware home or on vacation. That's unheard of right now. And again here, let's take a step back here. What are we dealing with right now? We've got high inflation. We just had the most border crossings recorded last month at the southern border. On top of that, you have war in Israel, war in Ukraine. All of these things are happening right now. Where is Joe Biden? He's on vacation. This is why more and more voters, you have a majority of Republicans, a majority of independents, and even a majority of Democrats are questioning Joe Biden's age, his fitness, his mental sharpness to do the job right now. And that is because every crisis that's happening, he had to be bullied by the media to end his vacation early in Hawaii when all those wildfires were happening. And he still hasn't visited Ohio with the train derailment that happened in February. So that's going to continue to be a lingering question here going into 2024.
Well, the other lingering question, Joe, is who's in charge? I mean, that's a legitimate question of if this guy can be on vacation every other week, chances are somebody else is pulling the levers, right?
Absolutely, David. And I have some numbers around it I'll share in a second, but I have to one-up Garrett on this one. This is more like Misery meets Weekend at Bernie's, if we're going to use the movie analogies, okay? Thank you.
That is a good
Anyway,
right.
here, but seriously, here we have Joe Biden going on vacation just one day after returning from another vacation. Yes. And this time, as you showed, he's off to St. Croix. He's at yet another opulent beachfront home. And this stat is truly unbelievable. As president, Joe Biden has spent more than 40% of his time in office on vacation. Now, let's put that in context for a moment. American workers, on average, take 14 days of vacation per year. President Biden has taken an average of more than 140 days per year of vacation. That's nearly 10 times as much, obviously. And Americans are frustrated and scared and angry right now about prices, like you just talked about with Art Lafler, still way too high for their taste that they can afford. They see rampant violent crime. They fear for their family's safety. They see protests engulfing parts of American cities on their screens every day and night. And it feels like things are just getting completely out of control going into an election year. And they see that U.S. southern border. That is truly a national security threat right now that the president should be addressing instead of ignoring while literally putting his head in the stand, David.
But, you know, Garrett, it's also a fear of conflict. I think that summarizes a lot of the problems with this administration, not just this administration, but with the blue side all over the place, whether they're the Democrats running a city or governors running a state. It's a fear of conflict, whether it's a fear of conflict with criminals. You don't want to hurt the criminals, so you keep letting them out. We just had an incident in New York, a horrific incident where this madman, this very violent madman stabbed two tourists in the back. Luckily, I believe they're both still alive, but their lives were in jeopardy. He had 17 arrests that he'd been let out on. And again, it fits this pattern, whether it's appeasing Iran or appeasing violent criminals or appeasing the illegal immigrants by the millions. It's a fear of conflict. You never had any fear of conflict with Donald Trump.
Absolutely, David, that's right. Under President Trump here, he secured the border. He was tough on crime. He dealt with peace through strength with our adversaries, and people like Iran and Russia feared and respected us. Now you have, again, here, you've got, again, there's war, Russia invading Ukraine. That didn't happen under President Trump. You have the wide open border here, record number of people pouring in. But it's also these very far left politicians capitulating to the worst instincts of their voters and their base. You're talking about anti-cop defunding the police. You're talking about cashless bail, letting ruthless and violent criminals right back on the street to commit crimes. So this is something that the left continues to do here. And I think smart Republican members of Congress, whether it's the House, Senate, or even all the way up to the presidency running right now, will run on law and order, will run on a secure border, just as like Richard Nixon did many years ago, and it worked very effectively.
It did.
People
Well,
are
the
scared
other
of
thing
those type of things.
that
I
got
think it's a very smart thing to
The
do.
other thing that got Richard Nixon elected was the convention in 1968. And Joe, that's the thing. I think that all of this compromise and no consequences attitude of these Democrats is going to come back to bite them, because you see the very far left, the people out in the streets right now, making life miserable for people that I don't know how they claim to want to prove their point. If they clog up the roadways, we just saw in New York today, the entrance and exits to JFK were all jammed up. People had to grab their suitcases and drag them across the lawns in order to get through. The same thing happened at LAX. I mean, what's going to happen if in the summer of 2024 in Chicago, we see a repeat of what we saw in 1968 in Chicago, with a convention that was totally out of control by the lefties taking over?
You just get the feeling we're headed towards a violent year here, David. Nobody wants this, of course. The New York airports are already a mess without protesters. And now here, during one of the busiest times of the year, they just feel they have the right to shut it down, because they're not looking to win hearts and minds. They're looking to bully people into submission in terms of taking their side on things. And the problem for the left now is that the rhetoric that they talked about in 2020, as far as defunding the police, for example, or surging the border and allowing everybody to come in, that rhetoric is now meeting reality. And Americans don't like this reality. And if this presidency, this election, comes down to a choice between who do you think is going to do better in terms of steering the economy and handling things like this that we're seeing on our screen, and obviously the border, it's hard to see Donald Trump or whoever the GOP nominee is losing to Joe Biden, who is not wine. He's not going to get better with age at this point.
You know, again, it all comes down to no consequences for actions. And I can't help but thinking it comes down to, like, when you're dealing with a spoiled kid, instead of saying you cannot have that, you cannot run out in the street or you're going to get killed, they say, okay, it's okay, honey, it's all right. I mean, they're saying that to Iran, they're saying it to the criminals, they're saying it to the illegal immigrants. I mean, it's that no consequences attitude, and I don't see it changing before the election. So Americans will have to choose if they want it or not. Joe and Garrett, great to see you, my friends. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to both of you.